Welcome to the SWIKE Podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SWIKE Podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with a mentor, and Dan Johnston. He's going to come to us from a background of writing and a little bit on sales and some of the creative works as well. So he'll tell us a little bit about what he's up to now, and then some of his influences, so we can learn a few of his SWIKE, the stuff he wished he knew earlier as he went through his career journey and what's up for him in the future as well. So Dan, if you can let us know what are you up to right now, and then we'll get into a little bit more about your backstory.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lukey. So hello, everyone. I'm Daniel. As Lukey mentioned, I am coming from an English background with a little bit of computer science thrown in there. I am currently a quality control supervisor at BreezeMax Web as a small little startup company, which essentially builds websites and helps out with advertising solutions for other companies and to help in the online world. And I'm actually very excited because I've actually been in the process of moving in my position. I recently accepted a position at the Canada Revenue Agency. I'll be moving in there and to more of a technical role. That's just sort of a little bit in the works at the moment, but it's something where I'm very excited to sort of transition in that sort of method. But yeah, absolutely. And I'm as of right now, my current role is in a quality control supervisor. A little bit more of the sort of the creative side. So I have, on the one hand, you have the little bit of making sure that websites meet sort of quality standards of my work, whether that be through the actual language that is being talked about, or whether it be through the back end, being able to make sure that things are working properly functioning, or just in general, making sure that clients are happy with the sort of the quality that is coming out from our work. So a little bit of a diverse sort of position there, and yeah, definitely a little bit different in that sort of sense too.
Cool. So congrats on kind of the new role that you'll be moving to in a couple of weeks, and maybe we'll get an update from you later on in terms of how that's going. But let's step back and kind of get to you as a kid. So what were you like growing up? Were you always interested in QA, like writing and things like that? And I know we've talked before where obviously you want to write a book, and it's more kind of on the fantasy realm, and you also got into kind of gemology and sales throughout your career too. So kind of walk us through some of the major milestones and some of the influences along the way.
Absolutely. So quality control is definitely something that is not really had been on my radar at all from most of my career, if not within the last couple of months even. Starting out when I was fairly small, I was mostly interested in a lot of things like even rocks and minerals, things where I would be able to just sort of collect rocks and find them on the ground and break them open on sewer grates just to see what's inside of them. And it was sort of my small passion that I would be able to sort of take in that way. Over time, I guess I sort of developed a little bit of a passion for writing as well. Just sort of always been a reader. I would devour books as a kid to the point where it was never enough. You would have books coming in all the time, sometimes through the library, sometimes through gifts or things that I would pick up. And it was just always part of who I was as a person, and something where I just enjoyed escaping into other worlds and finding new stories. So initially, I actually was something more along the lines of looking towards the gemological side. So I actually took it upon myself to go to school taking an online course with the Gemological Institute of America to get my certificate to become let's see if I get this right, accredited jewelry professional. So that was actually a 6-month course, which I took online. I believe is still available today, which essentially broke me out into the jewelry side of things. And so after my first job, which most people, they sort of start out in the food and fast food service area. I spent about 2 years at McDonald's to sort of start out my career. But after that, and sort of gaining my certificate, I moved into retail sales. And I moved as a sales professional with a smaller family-owned business called Charm Diamond Centers. It was there I worked for about 3 years, sort of working with jewelry of all kinds, from gemstones to diamonds and pendants to rings and everything in between. And it was sort of taking that passion that I had as a kid for some of the sparkly things and being able to bring it to the world and be able to show off some of the things that I really was passionate about. And it originally started as something as really like I enjoyed it purely as sort of a hobby and a passion in that way. But it sort of spiraled into something where I could use that and turn it into my into a job that I was really very happy with. And I also feel as though it was a really great time where I was able to develop some wonderful skills. I was a fairly shy kid. It was something where I wasn't overly expressive or things like that. I would be more introverted and keeping to my books and things like that. But I felt as though breaking out into the retail world was something that really helped me to be able to express myself and forced me to talk to people in an atmosphere which was a little bit more comfortable for me. So it was something where I could take one of my hobbies, which was my gemological stuff, and bring it to something where I would be able to really talk to people about something I was excited about. And I eventually moved up in the world. So I went from Charm Diamond Centers after 3 years. I moved actually down the hall in the same mall to Maison Berks, where I spent about a year doing a similar thing and a little bit more high-end jewelry. So I moved a little bit to some of the greater I don't want to say greater things, but it was something where it was definitely different and a different experience and a higher end jewelry. Unfortunately, it was something where the pandemic hit sometime around that point. And in March of 2020, I found myself, like many other people, without a job. And naturally, with the retail spaces, they just simply closed down, and there was nowhere to be able to work for someone like me. And so, in a sense, I had to redefine myself over that time. And I took it upon myself to continue to learn. At that point, in June 2019, I had actually come out of my English degree at school. And so for the following year, I actually went to school with the UTSC, which they were very gracious to be able to give you LinkedIn Learning, to be able to have for a whole year if you wanted to continue your education. So when the time that the pandemic came along, I suddenly found myself with a whole lot of time. And so I decided that I would take advantage of this opportunity to better myself and learn a little bit more about some of the writing aspects that I had been cultivating since I was little. And so I decided to look into more towards a copywriting side of things. Copywriter is someone who essentially writes things for marketing or essentially for advertising purposes. You look at people who would do things for advertisements, perhaps products, product descriptions, blogs, and that sort of idea, where essentially if you need copy or words, that's where the copywriter would come in. Now, it's not just as simple as being able to make words. You also have to make sure that the words are appropriate for the industry, and making sure that they are properly functioning for what you're looking for. So especially in the online world, you have things called search engine optimization, which you would have to essentially look at the words that you're writing and make them optimized for the keywords that particular people are searching for on search engines. And the more that you do this sort of thing, the easier it is for people to find you in the online world. And so that's sort of where I started to learn after I was in the pandemic. And for a little while, it was mostly sort of practicing my writing and figuring things out that way. And in fact, it was around this time, around June of 2020, that I found Luki, who was able to help me out in that sort of way. And we actually had been talking for a little while about my aspirations and where I wanted to go. And he suggested that I started writing for focusinspired.com, which I still write to this day, approximately a blog a week, where if you haven't checked it out, I would definitely tell you to do so. And from there, I actually was recognized from my current company, BreezeMax Web, where they saw my work. They saw some of the things that I was doing with Luki and the blogs that I was performing, and they decided to take me on as a content writer, which was a really great start for me in a brand new industry, and really was exciting for me in that sort of way. About 3 months into my new position, after doing content for a little while, they started to recognize that I was a little more detail oriented than somebody who was just meant for content. And so they were seeing how I was sort of picking apart the websites and seeing different ways that I would be able to help make it a little bit better, and something where the quality, if they wanted to be able to make sure that it was going out properly, or if a website was already up and I would see these little mistakes here and there. And so they decided to take a chance on me. And so at that point, they decided to move me into a quality control supervisor role. And it's from there that I've been ever since, of course, up until today, which in the next little while, of course, we'll see where it goes. But that's sort of my career in a little bit of a nutshell, and where I've sort of come from.
That's amazing. So thanks for sharing all of the kind of journeys into it, and we'll look forward to hearing about what comes next. But I wanted to dive a little bit more into kind of like back early in the day. So maybe, well, as early as you want to take it, like as you're finding these rocks and pulling them apart. Because what I'd love to hear is kind of how these little interests and passions develop. And then more interestingly, possibly, is how you could take that and say, hey, you know what? I can actually turn this into a job, maybe a career, maybe some sort of interest later on. But these little things can be quite helpful for folks. So can you talk about, I don't know, your best find in terms of like the rock that you remember or whatever, or like what did you do with it, or how did you start cultivating that? And it's probably not intentional at the time, but how do you kind of develop that interest? And then the point of, well, taking a certification, right? That must have been an interesting one where most people don't think about that. Those are the two things that I'd want to kind of dive into more, and probably a couple other things as well, but starting with those ones. So can you describe a little bit about that experience?
Sure. So as I was growing up, it was essentially, obviously not every rock that you find has something in it.
Sure.
But that was okay to me. It was something where if you find a rock, it's always a chance that you have something, and then you would be able to find it. And so it was something where I would just sort of start. I think it was mainly sort of collecting rocks on the beach where it's really started, where oftentimes you will find these smaller rocks, which are a little bit more of a gemstone style, where they would have like the little bits of rose quartz or the quartz or things like that, where it's a little bit more of the pure crystal rather than something hidden in a rock. I think after I started collecting those things, I sort of started to find rocks with things in them. So you would have little crystals which would be stuck in a rock on the side, or it would be something where you accidentally drop a rock on another rock and splits open. There's something inside, like a fossil, and it was something like that which really just sort of it piqued my interest to the point where the entire side of my house was just covered in rocks. And so it got to that point where eventually I was just sort of constantly fascinated with these things. Naturally, with books and my passion for reading, I would also gain literature on this sort of thing, where I would learn about rocks, or I would take a guidebook with me to make sure that I would find, if I find something, I would be able to understand what it is. And so I think the thing that was really something which really caught my attention was the variety that you would find in a lot of these things. And so it's something where it didn't matter what it was. I always found it interesting. And I would probably say the most interesting find that I found would probably be just this fairly large amethyst crystal, which I found on the side of a stream, probably about the size of my thumb, something like about that size, which for a crystal is fairly large, that you would be finding. And so I still have it. I'm not quite sure where I have it, but it is something where I've really, it's really sort of spiraled from there, and sort of being able to see that variety. And to be able to have a passion like that, where you just sort of want to know more, and just, it just seemed like the natural transition for me to be able to move into something where if I wanted to see all these different things and learn more about rocks and minerals and things like that, a jewelry store almost seemed like a natural fit. And it was something where I was still fairly curious, and I felt that the certification was something that was a little bit worthwhile for me, not only to be able to break into the industry, but also just as a purely curiosity thing. It's something where I actually found that I had done enough research that I was seeing little bits of my research here and there and what I was learning in the course, while also learning new things, of course. But it was just absolutely fascinating to me, and to be able to have something from a well-respected industry leader, it's something where I was really quite excited for it. And I think I answered your question. If I missed something in there.
What I took from that is to follow your curiosity, right? So it's just a matter of getting into that and saying, oh, okay, this rock, and you drop it, and wow, there's more to it inside. And what about this? And then getting books on it, and getting more versed in why or what, and all those sort of things, and progress to say, hey, you know what, I could actually turn that interest and find a job that kind of relates to it, and landing that role in a jewelry store, which I mean, that's not the typical kind of a doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer, but I mean, if you're doing things that you're interested and curious about, why not, right? Instead of just doing something that you're kind of quote unquote supposed to do versus something that you actually enjoy doing. I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of on the reading side. So we connected on kind of the writing area, right? So obviously the writing probably started with reading, and then what kind of spurred you into kind of writing more, or wanting to write more, and then you want to at some point write a book. So walk us through kind of like the journey of kind of learning and getting better at writing through your university, and then afterwards in learning, and then other areas where you've kind of developed yourself from a writing perspective.
Sure. So In terms of where I started in English, it was essentially with books. And so I would often be reading there were some of the books that I was reading as a kid. My favorites were Goosebumps. I also absolutely loved The Magic Tree House.
Right.
And it was something where some of these books, and the Hardy Boys, and you would have some of these mystery novels and things like that. And so it was kind of these books where you take these fantastical elements and to be able to explore these curiosities and different worlds. And it was something where I was always fascinated with world building and how you get these different, I want to say, fantasy elements of the stories. And it was also purely just from a joy of reading that I enjoyed books as well. I would be part of book clubs in school. There was, I believe, in high school or thereabouts, there was something called the Silver Birch, the Red Maple, book clubs and things like that, where you would have these chosen books for you, where you would have to be able to see these sort of different diversity of authors and different books and things like that. And it was through that I actually started to read one of my favorite authors as a kid was Kenneth Opel in his Airborne series. And so again, fairly science fiction, fantasy oriented, but it didn't even have to be kids to be fantasy or science fiction. There are a lot of novels that are out there that are also for adults, for science fiction, fantasy. Some of the things that I read on early that I would say is of note, you have things like War of the Worlds from George Orwell, or H.G. Wells, my apologies. And you also have things like Oryx and Crake from Margaret Atwood. And it was some of these things which sort of introduced into the world where I think I was introduced through the Silver Birch and Red Maple programs, which they were touted as these grand, amazing books that were by these well-respected authors. And yet they were still something where they were considered science fiction or fantasy. And it was something that was really an eye-opener for me to be able to say, oh, science fiction, fantasy, some of these things which are sort of like the imaginative, the creative, they're not just for kids. These are some things which you can enjoy as an adult, and it's well respected and gained many awards through that sort of idea. So it sort of opened my mind to sort of see new different ways that I could explore content and different books in that sort of way. Towards the writing side, I actually hated English to begin with.
Interesting.
It's something where in high school, I actually was looking at English as I didn't get it. There was all these significances and being able to sort of figure out what the author meant, and just it felt like I was trying to read an author's mind. And of course, nobody can read minds. That's not something you can do. But at the same time, it was very frustrating to me. And there was, I believe it was in grade 10 or so, where I met one of my people in class, in my English class, who he was very good at it, and he was getting high marks. He was doing great. And I asked him, I said, what do you do? What is your secret? How are you doing this in this English course? And he said, honestly, I just wing it. It's something where you look at these books and you just sort of feel what feels right. And it's usually when you look at it that way, it sort of comes out in a way that is often very similar to what the author was thinking. And even if it isn't, that's okay. It's still something where you'd be able to find your own significance in the novel itself. and it's a worthwhile way to be able to look at it. And so I went from looking at English as a what did the author mean to how is it significant to you?
Right.
And it was that real shift in perspective that it really changed my opinion of what English was, and it reflected in my marks as a result. It was something where I've really started to enjoy the experience again, and English started to become one of my favorite classes. And I really owe it to my classmate at that point to sort of bring me back into that sort of feeling. Um, Writing again, it was something where I sort of did it on the side. It was not really obviously something where I felt that um, I could really make anything out of it. It was really just a hobby again. And you always hear all these stories about sort of the starving artist and the people who um, write for a living and are constantly just at it day and night and making just enough to get by. But it's something where I slowly learned over time that this doesn't have to be the case. It's something where you I'm getting ahead of myself because that's a lot later in my writing. But getting back to it here, I really started to get into writing when I was actually playing a game online where I had a bunch of different. I believe it was a dragon egg collecting game that a lot of people sort of got into on Facebook, and there was a community which was uh, in that group, which essentially would hang out on these chats and online forums. And for the most part, I started off sort of with the game and just sort of like a pastime, just to be able to trade these eggs back and forth, until one person sort of brought me aside and said, "Hey, you look like someone that would be really interested in doing some writing and that sort of thing," because they were noticing sort of the way that I would be interacting and things like that. They said, "Would you be interested?" I said, "Sure, why not?" And so they brought me aside into this smaller group, and uh, we started writing on almost like a role play series where we would have this really grand world which had already been in place from when these people had been building the world previous to my arrival. And it was something so amazing to be able to be inserted into this grand fantastical world where they seem to know everything about it, and I just couldn't get enough of it. It was something where at the time I was fairly mostly still into the reading side of things, that I felt as though in order to explore this story, I would have to participate in through the role play side of things and writing and that sort of idea. And so as I sort of started to develop my character and to be able to continue to write in that sort of way, um, it just sort of spiraled into something where I enjoyed the writing aspect as well, and being able to create my own stories and to make this idea that uh, I don't have to have a book to be able to say to escape to another world. It's something where I can express my creativity and I can show off what I can do in this initially smaller group, but then eventually I had hoped to something a little bit larger. And so in my university career, uh, I had started off in computer science. It was something where I had really had the preconceived notion that because my parents were people who were in computer science and had done very well, it was something that, although I had a technical side to me, um, it was something where I wanted to sort of continue. And it wasn't, I think, until much later in my university career that I sort of started exploring the creative writing programs. And so I started to write in those, and sort of it's a workshop style course where you would be able to write short stories that you would share with the rest of the class. and they would critique it. And for each week, you would have 2 or 3 stories that you would have to read, or 2 stories and you would write one. And so we would go in the next class as a round table, sort of getting an idea as to feedback from the rest of your peers. And it was so fascinating to me to be able to read these stories from my peers, as well as contribute something to them as well. And it's really through this sort of process that I cultivated my writing and just love of writing in general. And so it was from then on that I really knew that writing was going to be sort of a piece of me from then on. And I have these grand plans of writing a book sometime in the future. It is something where I would love to be able to either write science fiction, fantasy, or both sometime in the future, to be able to be a published author of some kind. And it's sort of like this little side project for now, but it's something where I definitely want to sort of explore in the future. And for the moment, I've had a little bit of a foray into it in my career with as a content writer, and for you as well, Lukey. But it is something where I definitely want it to be part of my life, and will for sure be continuing on. I guess for the rest of it, I would hope.
Sounds good. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing or reading whatever that is. And I think some of the encouragement that I'm providing is to just take steps, like every month, day, week, or however much you can manage, but actually put the time, because that lofty goal that could happen one day starts with doing something today, right? But what I took from your story is, again, that curiosity, following kind of that interest. And another part is also to put yourself out there. So participate in the community. So you were curious and got into this community, but part of why you were able to kind of take advantage and find that thing that you feel passionate about and you love is that you participated. If you had not participated, probably wouldn't have gone the same way, right? By putting yourself out there and taking some of the feedback and just learning and growing, I think that was definitely useful. And then, yeah, we probably get into the how did the conversation between your techie parents who started you in computer science, and then now you want to switch to English? What? Like that conversation must have been an interesting one. But I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about kind of that foray into sales. So you talked about how you started as many do in kind of retail with McDonald's, then the family business, and then moving up to Maison Burks. And then how did that help or hinder, I guess, your career progression, and what are some of the learnings that you took from those experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always think that I definitely think it's something which is very worthwhile for a lot of people to be able to go into an industry like this. A lot of people look at it and they turn their nose down at it and just sort of say, no, this is grunt work. This is something where you don't really want to have this kind of job for as little time as possible, essentially, because it gets you nowhere. It doesn't teach you anything. It's just something to give you money while you're in school. And to that, I say, absolutely not. This is something where I learned a whole lot in terms of in every job that I've been in, starting with even with McDonald's in that sort of way, where McDonald's really taught me in terms of being able to work under pressure. It was something where you're under a lot of constraint to be able to manage a whole lot of things at once, and to be able to manage your time, make sure that you're on top of everything. You've very rarely had a break where you would have to take a moment to be able to think for yourself. You have to be on your feet. You have to be working. You have to be going quickly, especially in the kitchen side of things. And so, although it was a very difficult sometimes to be able to do keep up and that sort of thing, I did find it very valuable in sort of teaching me these sort of things. On the retail side, I'm even more baffled as to why people don't understand the value in this sort of a position. It's something where I feel coming into my first retail job, I was not nearly as well able. Obviously, now I'm tripping over my words and completely ruining my point, but it's something where I was unable to speak as coherently and uh, as easily as I am today, to be able to just talk to people and get my voice out there. And it was something where being able to put myself in a position where I'm actually talking to people every single day, constantly, and just practice even in a social area. I think a lot of people can benefit from that sort of an idea. And yeah, some people, they maybe not so interested in the sales side of things, but there are still a lot of retail jobs and variations that I still accomplish the same thing, where it doesn't necessarily have to be sales and commission heavy. I took positions where it was actually not entirely commission. It was something where you would get a base salary as well as a commission. So you didn't have as much of a pressure to be able to go and just sell. It was something where you could make a lot of money if you decided to get yourself out there and be excellent. But it was also something where they wanted to make sure that you weren't feeling as though if you're having a bad day, then you're absolutely crushed, because you're just on commissions. That's the only way that you're going to be making money. And it's something where I was looking back on it now, it was something I very much appreciated in my particular line of work. It is something where there are some people who prefer just a base salary, where commission is off the table. They could go in, feel comfortable just to be able to do their day-to-day work. And there are other people who enjoy that high, fast-paced, commission-based idea. And there is no wrong answer. It is something where you look at the kind of work that you have there, and you just do what is comfortable for you. And to be able to go into whatever sort of an idea that is, perhaps you would want to be someone more towards just the customer service end, where you help someone find something that they're looking for and cash them out at the end. And that's okay. You're still getting a lot of experience to be able to talk to people, interact with a wide variety of people, gaining connections. It's something where even while I was working at my retail jobs, I had a number of people who were in fascinating industries that I would be talking to on a daily basis, gaining connections. I still have a stack of business cards, which I gained from them. And it's something where you'd never know where the kind of connections that you get. And even in something like this, you gain people that you still talk to at the end of the day. And I honestly, I think that just from that standpoint alone, retail is a wonderful experience for a lot of people to have. But there are so many reasons beyond that I could take another hour to be able to go in through that. With regards to your other point about moving into English and having sort of the parents' perspective from the computer science side of things, it is something where my parents definitely had this idea of moving through computer science was one of the best ways to be able to gain a career. And it is I agree with them in a way, to be able to say that it is a very lucrative career, but it's not something where everybody would be able to fit into that sort of thing. And they understood that to a degree. I was also in a very difficult position where for a long time I had no idea what it was I wanted to do, because it was something where I felt there was a large amount of pressure on the one side to follow my parents' footsteps and be in this amazing industry that had so much potential. But on the other side, I also had this opinion that I had a lot more creativity in me than I had the analytical. Sure, I do have the analytical, but not nearly as strongly. And it's something where I really felt that as soon as I recognized that, it was an eye opener for me to be able to explore some of the things that I didn't even think were possible. Something that I thought was a dead end with writing and some just as the starving artist sort of idea. Just with a little more research, I could discover copywriting. And it was something where I would be able to take some of my passions and bring them to the world as something that I'm really good at. And I discovered that just because I'm enjoying it doesn't mean that it's something that you shouldn't be doing because it's easy, or it's something that's um, it's something that because you're enjoying it, it couldn't possibly go anywhere. That's ludicrous. It's it's absolutely like, if you enjoy your job, if you love what you're doing, then you will be that much more successful. And it's something where you should never feel as though you're giving up opportunities to be able to uh, go and find what your dream is, because really the dream is where you're going to excel, and finding that niche where you fit the best, that's the goal for anybody. And I feel as though I'm still looking for that. It is something where I have a whole lot of ideas that are flowing around, and figuring out where it is that I really belong, and sort of taking all the pieces of me apart and figuring out what fits the best into my career. But I think over the last year or two, I think I've really started to get a better understanding of who I am as a person. And of course, being able to grow in the future and move into something uh, maybe a little bit more of a fit for me. That's always the goal, to be able to grow as a person and continue to find your new path.
Cool. Yeah, what I took from that is, well, on the sales side is really give it a shot and use it as practice, and make the most out of the opportunity, because there's so many great things that you could acquire, be it practicing your communication or how to interact with others, developing relationships, and how to build those over time. There's a lot of great things, and sometimes with or without the pressure of commissions and things like that, it's really up to you depending on how you excel. And then on the side of like influences from parents and things like that, well, really taking the time to kind of explore what's out there. Like, is that path the right one for you? And if you have no better options, then maybe you follow it. But if you take a little bit of time to research and think about other areas, explore, talk to people that are doing things that might be interesting to you, hey, there might be this other world out there that you could find. And you're still figuring out, just like I am, right? And now I'm a little bit further ahead, so I know a bit more of what really interests me. But who knows what'll happen in a year, 5 years, when I decide to find something else, and same with you. So for those listening, it's a matter of figuring out, okay, well, let's take the time and make those conscious decisions in terms of where you want to like direct your career and all that sort of stuff, right? But yeah, and have fun in the process. So as we start to wrap things up, what are a couple of the SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier, that if you could go back to kind of young Dan when he was in maybe some more troublesome times where he was just trying to make decisions or doing whatever, what's kind of one or two things that you would share with him in order to kind of help him out in his career journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something where it seems silly to say, but with someone who was so curious to begin with the journey from the rocks to the books and learning and that sort of thing, and always trying to better myself in that sort of way and learn new things, I almost want to say that I should have been more curious.
Oh, okay.
It was something where I closed doors where I felt there were none, and it was something where I feel like if you're not trying to find who you are and you're trying to fit into a mold, that just doesn't seem like you, then you're really not doing yourself a service. It's something where you really need to listen to yourself, listen to what you are, what you're enjoying, what you're doing, and find where you naturally fit, rather than forcing yourself and sort of molding yourself into like putting a square peg in a round hole kind of a thing. And although I do say that while I was sort of exploring in that sort of way and finding out what I didn't really fit in, I did find that some of the things I learned in that time were some very valuable things that I still carry forward to today. So the other thing that I would say is don't discount anything. If you have something that you've learned, if you've had something that you're passionate about, take it into consideration. Make sure that you are taking all of the skills that are available to you and making sure that you actually put them into something that makes sense, or at least be able to move forward and find a direction from that. Because if you ignore what you are passionate about and consider it only about as a hobby, you're going to find yourself very directionless very fast. And it's something that I discovered while I was in university, while taking my undergraduate degree for a grand total of about 9 years. And it's something where I look back on it now and I'm grateful for the experiences that I have, and it's made who I am today. But it is definitely something where if I just looked at it at the beginning, and if I just took the time to be able to make sure that I was actually being true to myself and understanding where I needed to go, I probably would have been there a lot sooner. And I know that I mentioned that my parents had sort of influenced me towards the computer science aspect of things, and having that sort of expectation in a sort of, if you will. But I also wanted to note that they have been very supportive of me through this entire endeavor, and I felt very grateful for that support. And even through the transition to a sort of more creative side of things, although they were initially looking at it as, okay, that's a little bit of a different path, they obviously wanted what was best for me and came around very quickly to be able to say, yes, we support you. We want you to do what's best for you. And so I've felt very grateful for that, and they've been guiding me as well through my career process, and in fact has been a very large part as to why I'm moving on now to my new and bigger and better things. And so I'm very grateful for that as well. So definitely something that I would say to a lot of people is the last stuff I wish I knew earlier, I guess, is your parents always have your best interest at heart, for the most part. And it's definitely something where you may feel like they're not, they might not understand you to some degree sometimes, but they definitely have a lot of wisdom that they have to share with you. And they are definitely some people that you should be listening to if you are, again, going back to don't discount anything, taking everything into account. And you find that you'll learn a lot of things and to become who you are as a person. Yeah, for sure.
That's great. So what I took from that is, well, I like what you said about finding who you are versus trying to fit in the mold. I think that's great. So following that curiosity, I think is key for many people. And when you talk about like not discounting anything, it's kind of that quote where people say that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. So it's really up to you to look at the experience and say like, well, why did I have that, and how would it help me? Because one thing that could happen is that, hey, maybe you'll start a ginormous tech company later on, so your computer science background would have been a healthy foundation for that, right? And to your point about parents wanting your best interests at heart, yeah, at the end of the day, they just really want you to be happy, right? With whatever you end up doing. They might have their own idea of what happiness is, because through their experience, they believe that following kind of the traditional path with like computer science or like doctor, lawyer, engineer, or whatever, that's what everybody should be doing. But if you provide them with kind of a clear plan or understanding of like, hey, this is what I plan on doing, and I'm doing it not just willy-nilly. It's I'm actually structured plan, and this is how I'm going to move forward to become successful. Whatever success means for you, then they usually have your interest at heart. But yeah, hopefully you're not, because there's always the one parent that's not. but hopefully your parents are supportive, and it sounds like when you communicate and have those conversations, they become more and more. So thanks so much, Dan, for joining us on this episode, and hopefully we'll have you back to talk about some other things, maybe about writing, maybe about creativity, maybe about gemology, and then learn a little bit more about that. So thanks a lot for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me, and I would love to come back sometime and to talk a little bit more. And it's been very great.
Take care. Thanks. Thanks for joining us on the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.